so sorry." At that moment, Jonas felt more love for his wife than he had over the last 2 years. The noise of the car horn forced him to move. When he walked out the front door, Masao Tanaka was waiting. Rick and Naomi Morton were celebrating their 10th anniversary in San Francisco, glad to momentarily escape the cold weather of Pittsburgh and their 3 children. They had never actually seen a real whale, so the idea of spending the day whale-watching seemed exciting. Dressed in a yellow slicker, loaded with camcorder, binoculars, and his trusty 35mm, Rick followed his wife on board Captain Jack's Whale Watcher, a 42-foot sightseeing boat docked at the Monterey Bay Wharf. The couple found an empty spot along the stern, then waited impatiently for the 27 other passengers to take their seats among the wooden benches. The presence of the megalodon had initially hurt business among Monterey's whale-watching tours, but the tourists gradually began returning, mostly because the predator had not been seen in almost a week and only surfaced at night. For their part, tour boat owners unanimously chose to cancel all sunset excursions rather than risk a confrontation with the Meg. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced a beautiful redhead decked out in a white sailor outfit, "welcome on board Captain Jack's Whale Watcher. You folks are in for a real treat today. The humpbacks have been putting on a great show all morning for us, so get your camcorders ready." The boat chugged ahead, a film of blue exhaust choking those passengers seated in the stern. Bud Harris gathered his belongings and stuffed them into a brown paper bag provided by the orderly. Unshaven, badly in need of a shower, the once proud entrepreneur had been reduced to a feeble shell of his former self. Deeply depressed after having witnessed his lover's death, Bud no longer cared whether he lived or died. He felt alone and in pain, uninterested in eating and afraid to sleep. Extremely worried, his doctors brought in a psychiatrist who decided that a change in environment might do the patient some good, and so it was decided that Bud would be discharged. The nurse arrived to escort her patient out of the hospital with the traditional wheelchair ride. "Mr. Harris, is anyone meeting you downstairs?" she asked. "We're here to meet Mr. Harris." The man strode into the room, followed by his younger counterpart. "Mr. Harris, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir. My name is Dr. Frank Heller, and this is my associate, retired Naval Captain Richard Danielson." Heller held out his hand. Bud ignored it. "Mr. Harris, I understand that your friend Maggie Taylor was killed by the megalodon," Heller said. "My brother Dennis was butchered by the same monster." Bud looked up. "I'm sorry for your loss, but right now I'm kind of fucked up myself, so if you'll excuse me." "Hey," said Danielson, "this thing has killed a lot of people, and we need your help to kill it. Now, it was our feeling that maybe you'd want to be involved in a little payback." Danielson looked at Heller. "Maybe we were wrong." The thought of killing the megalodon seemed to set off a spark in Bud. He focused his eyes on Danielson for the first time. "Listen, pal, that monster ruined my life. It took the only person I ever cared for, tortured her right in front of my eyes. If you're serious about killing this thing, then I'm in." "Good," said Heller. "Listen, we're going to need your boat." Bud shook his head. "That's how I got into this fucking mess in the first place." The male humpback leapt out of the water, twisting its 82,000-pound torso in midair, then slammed its back upon the surface of the blue Pacific with a thundering splash. 200 yards away, the whale watchers clapped with enthusiastic approval. "Wow! Rick, did you get that one on tape?" asked Naomi. "Got it." "Get some more still shots, okay?" "Naomi, I've got 2 full rolls already. Give me a break." "Something's coming up," announced the tour guide. "Get your cameras ready." 20 camcorders rose in unison. The mammal surfaced, flopped onto its stomach, and lay motionless in the water. Silence. Nothing moved. The whale still floating. And then the torso rolled, revealing a 12-foot bloody gash along its stomach. The whale watchers gasped as one. "Is it dead? What killed it? Is that a bite mark?" Something was rising from beneath the humpback. The carcass lifted several feet, and then the entire 41-ton mammal disappeared, dragged underwater. Screams rose from the whale watchers. The carcass resurfaced. Blood gushed from another crater-sized wound along the dorsal side of the dead humpback. The sea turned crimson red. The captain of the whale-watching boat panicked. As he revved his engines and swung around hard, the momentum knocked half of his passengers out of their seats. The tourists screamed, unsure of what was happening. 50 feet below, the predator felt the sudden vibrations. The Kiku was anchored 8 miles due west of the Tanaka Institute. Most of her crew was still asleep from the previous night's patrol. Terry Tanaka, clad only in a white string bikini, lay on a lounge chair on the upper deck facing the sun. The suntan oil glistened off her dark skin. Jonas sat in the shade, attempting to read his newspaper, his eyes constantly returning to the woman. "Aren't you cold, Terry?" She smiled. "It's warm in the sun. You should try it. You'd look good with a tan. When this is all over, I'll take a vacation, get away somewhere. Maybe a tropical island." Jonas smiled at the thought. "Want to come?" Terry sat up. "Yeah, okay." Jonas could see the girl was serious. His tone changed. "You'd want to come?" Terry sat up, pulling off her sunglasses. She looked Jonas square in the eyes. "Try me, Jonas. You won't be disappointed." "Jonas Taylor, report to the CIC immediately." The metallic announcement boomed over the ship. Jonas stood up, unsure of what to say to Terry. "Hey, wait for me," she said, pulling on a sweatsuit over the bikini. They headed down the stairwell. "So, where are we going to stay in Hawaii?" Jonas heard Terry call out over her shoulder. DeMarco was waiting for him in the pilot house. "Jonas," he said, "we just picked up a distress call from a whale-watching boat not far from here. Looks like the Meg's back." "In broad daylight? How?" The answer popped into Jonas's head almost as quickly as he asked the question. "Wait a minute, she's blind. It doesn't matter anymore. Damn, how could I have been so stupid?" "The monster's blind?" asked Terry. "Yes and no, Terry. Her eyesight may be—" "Jonas, Masao needs you right away in the CIC," commanded DeMarco. Jonas and Terry followed the engineer into the dark information center as the Kiku weighed anchor, her twin screws churning water. Masao was standing over his sonar man, watching the fluorescent green screen intently. "Jonas, what's happening here? You said this monster only surfaces at night." "Masao, it's my fault. I didn't take into account that the megalodon may have been totally blinded. I knew Mac's spotlight had damaged one eye. I didn't realize that I may have blinded her in her other eye during the night of the storm." "So the monster's blind. That's good," said Masao, smiling. "Isn't it?" "Not really," said Jonas. "If the Meg really has surfaced, it means she's not only blind but has overcome her fear of ultraviolet light. But a megalodon losing its sight is a lot different than you or me going blind. You have to realize this creature possesses 7 other sensory organs that are extraordinarily efficient. Considering the fact that this female spent most of her life in complete darkness, losing her eyesight is probably a minor inconvenience at best." "In other words," said Jonas, "we're still dealing with the most formidable predator ever designed by nature, and she's no longer limited to surfacing at night. I'd say things just got worse." "Sir, I've got a visual on sonar," announced Pasquale excitedly. Jonas, DeMarco, and Masao converged on the sonar man. "Where's she headed, Pasquale?" Captain Barr stood over the screen watching. "Looks like she's moving away from us, about 2 miles due east." "Good job. Stay on her." Barr slapped the man on his back. "Helm, change course 5 degrees to starboard, slow to 10 knots. Where's your flyboy, Dr. Taylor?" "I'm here." Mac came stumbling in, still half asleep. "Mac, we've located the megalodon. Are you ready to go?" asked Jonas. Mac rubbed his eyes. "Sure, Doc. Just give me 30 seconds to pour some coffee into my eyes." "Jonas, Alfonso, get to your stations," ordered Masao. "Mac, I'm leaving." Mac headed out through the pilot house. Moments later, the helicopter lifted off the deck of the Kiku. "Jonas, you read me?" "Go ahead, Mac," yelled Jonas into the walkie-talkie. He and DeMarco were positioned at the stern, ready at the deck-mounted harpoon gun. "I'm about 200 feet above the boat. It's difficult to see because of the reflection along the surface. Stand by, I'm changing my angle. Mac turned the airship south, hovering to the right of the boat. The thermal imager was useless during the day. Oh shit, there she is. Where, Mac? Right behind the whale watcher's keel. Christ, she's got to be twice the size of that boat. The Kiku was now following the tourist boat's wake, bearing down on the smaller vessel. DeMarco, Jonas yelled into the wind. Have Barr take us alongside. I can't risk firing at this angle. I might miss and take out a passenger. Rick Morton watched the former Navy frigate approach the tourist boat from his seat at the rear of the ship. The Kiku's white bow dwarfed the smaller boat, rising high out of the sea, plowing a 4-foot wake against the Captain Jack. Naomi, let go of my arm. I want to get a shot of this ship. Naomi released his arm and grabbed her husband's waist as the boat zigzagged. As he lifted the camcorder, a different object appeared in his eyepiece. At first, Rick thought he must have focused on the frigate's towering bow, white and triangular. Then his autofocus adjusted, and he dropped the camera. Naomi screamed. Others turned and joined her cry. Rising 15 feet above the Captain Jack, the megalodon's head and lower jaw crashed down upon the stern. The twin propeller shafts snapped like twigs, the transom shattering into 1,000 splinters of fiberglass. Jonas fired. The harpoon exploded out of the cannon, trailing smoke and steel cable. The projectile struck home, burying itself 4 feet deep in the megalodon's thick hide, inches from the dorsal fin. The monster spasmed, arching its back and whipping its head sideways into the moving Kiku. The ship lurched to starboard. Wham! The Meg rammed its head into the Kiku's portside hull, bending steel plates. Jonas and DeMarco fell to the deck. 300 feet above the Pacific, Mac watched as the Kiku raced to open waters. The Meg followed, submerging, the slack of the steel cable still floating momentarily along the surface before being dragged below. Jonas checked the cardiac monitor that was receiving data directly from the transmitter still implanted in the Meg's belly. Damn, 212 beats per minute. I think she's having a bad reaction to the drugs. The megalodon's brain was on fire, her blood boiling, her heart racing out of control. The predator's sensory system was overloaded by the madness brought on by the large dosage of pentobarbital. The female could only follow her last instinct, attack her enemy. Plunging to a depth of 1,500 feet, the Meg spun and raced back toward the surface. The crescent tail whipped and forth, the monster a white blur streaking upward. Feeling the vibrations of the Kiku's bow cutting the surface, the megalodon adjusted her line of attack and rammed into her enemy, smashing the forward compartment of the ship's hull. Had the megalodon connected with the Kiku's flat keel, the ship would surely have sunk within minutes. But the attack occurred near the bow, and the force of the impact dispersed outward. The blow knocked the giant predator senseless, slowing her pulse enough for the pentobarbital and ketamine to take effect, shutting down the creature's central nervous system. The female was losing feeling in her tail. She slowed, barely moving, hovering almost 1,200 feet below